My ways are not your ways. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so my ways are beyond your ways, and my thoughts are beyond your thoughts. This quote from Isaiah speaks about the formation of our prayer and how it should reflect our humility before the mystery of God. The way that we position our prayers before God is very important. When we presume to know what we need and what God should give to us, our prayer can become very arrogant and goal-oriented. It can even demand our satisfaction at the expense of other people. But when we approach God with humility and acknowledge that we don't know everything, we don't have all the answers, that we don't always push for what is best for us, and are less concerned about fulfilling our own specific wants, then our prayer can become more concerned about exercising practical, loving behavior in our relationship with God and with others. After years of praying alone and with others, I have seen that those who seem to know God best always approach God humbly, allowing God to answer in his own way and in his own time. While those whose prayer is more goal-oriented are invariably far too sure of themselves. They tend to seek specific answers to their needs, not trusting in God's will for them. When we approach God in prayer, we must understand that God exists apart from us and is not subject to the limitations of our material universe. We have no specific language. There is no specific prayer or devotion that is adequate to describe the holy. We must quiet the words that spill out of us, especially the words that speak only of our own longing, hurts, and fears. And in the quiet of unknowing, remind ourselves that God is too great and too sacred to be captured by words alone. We find God, we must be very serious about seeking him, be more humble in the questions that we ask, and less demanding about the answers that we want. Contemplative prayer is a fine balance between knowing and not knowing, between using words that petition God for help and words that express our humility before God. This is unfortunate that we have never really been taught how to seek this kind of balance in our prayer. Most of us were taught to pray with a formula, and that formula promised absolutes and certainties. We were taught that formal prayer and specific devotions will make our claims heard, and we feel very insecure when they are not. When we were young, we were taught through the study of the Catechism that faith will always provide us with clarity, certitude, and identity. It certainly does do that. But it is prayer acting as a balancing agent that unlocks our faith. Prayer begins from the outside, where we learn our prayers by rote. But for our prayer to really begin to bear fruit, it must move to the inside, to what most of us would call the mystical side. Without this unlocking, we will never become a mature Christian. And certainly not a Christian who is able to build any kind of bridge to anybody else. Prayer is an internal balancing act. It moves between knowing and not knowing. In our prayer, we move beyond words, beyond concepts and images, into silence to create a higher form of consciousness. This great and healing balance is very difficult because the ego insists on certitude and perfect clarity. And that is not always possible with things divine. And so we experience periods of uncertainty and doubt. But it is those periods of doubt and unknowing that are very necessary for our prayer to grow. Doubt is the passageway from one stage to the next. When we have doubts, the assumptions that give shape to our prayer are challenged. When we experience our spiritual life descending into unknowing, doubt, and uncertainty, it can feel like a part of us, the part that was so self-assured, is dying. As Jesus cried out in his own prayer to God, we find ourselves crying out, "Let this cup of suffering be taken from me." Or, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This deep anguish is the painful and necessary process by which we are stripped of our know-it-all arrogance, our ego, our self-will. Early in my own priestly ministry, I realized that my own prayer was changing. It was starting to act like an X-ray of my soul, exposing much of my so-called spirituality as a vanity project of my ego, an expression of my own arrogant desire to always be right, my desperate and fearful need to always be in control, my unexamined drive to tame the wildness of life by naming it and dominating it with words. My doubt about the efficacy of my own prayer was just the fire I needed to purge me of my previously unacknowledged arrogance. I was exposed to a period of desolation in which God felt absent from me, a period in which I could not see or understand the way forward, and where I felt abandoned and lost. My prayer changed. It was less self-confident and more open to God's will. And to my surprise, this period of doubt turned out to be a passageway into something deeper and greater. In fact, my descent into spiritual dryness and soul darkness led me to a deeper experience of union with God. My thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so my ways are beyond your ways, and my thoughts are beyond your thoughts. My friends, prayer that is centered on not knowing and not needing to know can lead us into a deeper understanding of God's presence in our life. And it will also instill in us a deeper compassion for those who journey with us in faith.